right, here we are. Here we are back once again with an episode of WESPN. Not going to be much more WESPN out there for us, eh?
I think we might do a little shift here.
We're going to do a little shift. We're going to shift this into a podcast with podcasts on YouTube as well. But we want it on Apple and Spotify, and then we'll cut some for Instagram and stuff like that in the fun way that we usually do. But I think we're going to retire the WSPN name because no one knows what it means, and it doesn't really make any sense, to be honest. So
I don't even know what it means.
I know it actually means Windsor Essex Scott Paul News if you're keeping score at home. But you know what? It just doesn't make much sense. We may utilize the WSPN banner for some breaking news, stuff like that. But we're going to transition this into a podcast. We got new mics. We're taking it to the next level here. New mics are in the house, and hopefully the sound is coming off a little bit better. And I'm excited.
I mean, we've been laid off here for quite a while. I think our last one was 6 months ago or so.
Well, consistently inconsistent, right? So we've been busy. Market's shifting here. We're still absolutely slammed, but I think we want to get more back to this because the consumer needs to be educated no more than now, right? Today's episode is definitely going to go over that. We want to bring the consumer amazing content with the real estate process. So today we've got Christian Janisse from simplyclose, who's going to just explain the lawyer process in a real estate transaction, which I think is a great idea. I think most buyers and sellers don't know exactly what the lawyers do, and we're going to break it down for you today and explain that. But Scott, I've been hiding from you all day today because I got one question for you.
Let's hear it.
You've got 5 seconds to answer.
Let's hear it.
What do you think is on my shirt right now?
Oh, God. Pineapples?
No, that is incorrect.
Chains? Gold
Yes,
chain?
they are
It's a
gold chains.
Wow, okay.
It's got pineapple, corn on the cob. Katrina said something else. What'd you say? Peppers. But it is
Yellow
indeed
peppers.
gold chain. So, getting into it. Okay, a lot has changed. A lot of movement out there. A lot of things are happening. And what's going on out there, Scotty? What do we see?
Well, the last time we were on this podcast was 6 months ago, but that's a testament to how hot the market was. We didn't even have time to jump on and do these shows.
Yeah.
So the market has definitely shifted since then. We've entered into a rising interest rate environment, which changes the whole game. We're now in a. Would you consider it to be a buyer's market right now?
I think it is a balanced market, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Not all properties are selling equally or sitting equally. Like there are still.
Having said that, I think it's heading towards a buyer's market rapidly.
Yeah, I think we're on that trajectory. But I would say that the price range, 0 to 400, 0 to 450. Dan had a listing yesterday that had 9 or 10 offers
13.
on it. I think 13 offers. That lower price range where the first time buyers, like they still need to buy, right? And it doesn't get any more affordable than that. So that's still pretty competitive. I'm finding the biggest shift in the market has been between, I don't know, 6 to 900K or so.
Yep.
I think that's where we're seeing the biggest drop off. Possibly the reason for that is because those are the least unique properties, right? You've got your cookie cutter raised ranch and the subdivision. There's just so many of them that people have choice now. The premium properties I'm finding still pretty competitive. Just had the sale on Kensington there that we didn't have 50 offers or anything, but we got the price that we were looking for. So different price ranges are showing us different things, but it is, I would say we're building inventory every day as well. So it could shift more and more into the buyers.
It, right? Before, the advantage of being on market was just being on market. You didn't need much more than that. Now, I would say 1 in every 4 or 5 properties are selling. So you have to be, a 75, 80% better than your competition. And there's a lot of competition out there. When we would run the numbers in February, March, active listings to come see LaSalle and everything in between, that number would be about 150, give or take 30. You run that same number now of active listings, it's in the mid high 8s.
Wow.
So it's an inventory issue.
So 6 or 7 times the inventory, which means people have 6 or 7 times more options.
That's right.
Buyers are still out there.
Yep.
I've had listings with 20 to 30 showings, right?
Yep.
Rosebriar, for instance. But guess what? we're not the only game in town. So they're just gonna, they're shopping around and they're finding other similar properties or better prices or whatever the case is. So the inventory is the big thing, and I would say that we're still stocking inventory.
Absolutely.
Up to now. And we might have a couple more interest rate hikes as well coming up, according to the Bank of Canada, which means we're likely going to maybe be stocking even more inventory.
Yeah,
So-
it's definitely heading that way. I think from a buy and sell perspective, right now where conditions are back. So for the sellers that are buying as well, you got to have to take the guessing game out of it, and you can do that now. And taking the guessing game out of a real estate transaction of what you're going to pay and what you're going to sell for is eliminated by introducing a house to sell condition, right? So making an offer on a new purchase, but you have to sell your place. Offers or properties are missing offer dates. You come in, you write an offer, fair at today's market value or whatever you landed at, and you make that condition on your place to sell. Get your place prepped and up. If your place sells for X, then you'll buy the purchase for Y, and then you remove on the same day at the same time, and it just takes out the guessing game.
Yeah.
I like that market. I mean, I don't mind. I like this market once we know where we're going to land. It's a fun market to work. I love negotiating for buyers, and I love helping sellers prep to make sure that their property's the best one out of X how many are in the same neighborhood.
Yep, and a good thing with that as well is when you have a house to sell condition or you're buying and selling in the same market, it eliminates the risk of timing the market, right?
Yeah.
We don't time the market. We just report what's happening. But when you have the house to sell condition, you make sure you get the price you need on the sale side. Well, if you buy in the same market, then who cares if the market dips 5% over the next year or 2 years, right? We play the long game in real estate. Long-term prices, up and to the right? So
Yeah, and having said that, I mean, if you bought something today, I would definitely recommend you get your house up on market next week because the market is coming down until further notice. That is what we're seeing out there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to go back up until the interest rates come back down. I think it's very obvious that those two correlate with each other 100%.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess that would be the next question. Hey, like where are interest rates going? Where do we see this settling? It was pretty obvious that the pendulum swung way too far, if you want to call it to the left, which is ultra low interest rates, printed money, free money, cheap money, investors, people are out there buying willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Literally, we had interest rates. I have people that were getting interest rates under 1.5%.
Right.
It's basically free money. So the pendulum swung too far. Prices were rising too fast. That wasn't healthy, by the way. Like, how long could you really sustain that? You were pricing out Canadians out of the market, first-time home buyers. We lost 20 or 30 of them over the past 12 months. They just got priced out too quickly. Your income can't keep pace with those price rises.
Impossible.
Yeah. So it swung way too far to the left. Now I'm going to predict that it's going to swing too far to the right, which we're already seeing. When you raise interest rates, 500% in like three months, that's too far, too fast. But they have to overcorrect because they overcorrected to the opposite side as well. So it's going to come back and settle somewhere in the middle. We just don't know when.
Yeah.
It took about 18 months for the printed money and the low interest rates to lead to 8% inflation. It took a while for that money to cycle through the economy, but now here we are with 8% inflation. It might take another 12 to 18 months for the higher interest rates to filter through the economy and bring things back to normal. But we should settle somewhere in the middle. And I would just say this, like, the world's not ending. This isn't the first time we've been through a real estate cycle or interest rate cycle.
Yeah.
A lot of people right now are like, oh, the market's going to zero, the world's ending, I got to sell my house, or I got to stay out of the market, whatever. Well, where are people going to live, right? Like, it's you don't have an option. Real estate's always going to be around. So I don't know exactly where this is going to settle, but if I was to predict, it would be 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts or feedback on that, or
No, I think the media is doing half our job right now
good
for
point,
us as well. I think once we know where these rates settle and where we land, I think we're going to get back to a normal real estate market. January, February, March, that was not normal. Like that just wasn't normal.
that was the most abnormal we've had. Like the whole 3 years has been abnormal. That was the most abnormal.
That jump from January to March was absolutely insane. And we are heading into a recession or we're in one. And people, I've worked in 07, 08, 09 as a realtor, and people just kind of collect what they have and they don't do anything, right? But in this market, this is a market that presents a ton of opportunity for the people who are prepared for it and ready for it. And we cannot predict the bottom, just like in March, we didn't know that was the top. We can now say that March was definitely the top. But if you're an investor or you're looking for a property, don't try and time the bottom. Buy something on the way down. And then if it goes down even further and you've got the ammo, buy another one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely love that mentality.
Great opportunity in this market.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, if you're a buyer and a seller, it's all relative, right? Just like you wouldn't get as much for your house, you're going to pay a lot less. Your delta might even be a little bit better.
Yep, we're seeing. I'm seeing first time buyers starting to get interested. I'm working with a couple right now that they may not have been looking if it was January, February, March because it was too crazy. So
I think if you came to us in March with a $300,000 budget, like respectfully, we would just have to say, you know what? It's my job to report the market. There's just nothing out there in that price range. Unfortunately, we can't help you, but we'll monitor the market for you. Now I'm seeing, and we track every single sale every single day. We know what it was listed for, what it sold for, what agents were on each side. That's stuff that we look at. That's stuff that we want to be interested in. I'm seeing stuff in the 200s again every day. And I'm seeing great properties at 350. Turnkey sold, little wartime 2-bed, 1 or 2 bath on George Street. 350, 360. That's a great property.
And that would have been 20 offers, 450, just 3 months ago.
500, yeah.
So that's why the buyers left.
Yeah.
So now they're starting to come back, and that's exciting because we love working for those people as well.
Yeah, I want to welcome back the buyers. We've been waiting for you, and we're prepped and ready to work for you. And again, there's a lot of product out there, and there's a lot of stuff to see. And don't be scared to shoot your shot on some offers. The worst a seller can say is no, and they say it to us, not you. So don't worry about it. We'll be more than happy to rate those offers.
Yeah, and I would say be patient. And if you had a list of 10 things that you wanted in a home 3 or 4 months ago, you may get 2, 3, or 4 of them.
Yeah.
Now you have the option to potentially get 9 or even 10 of the items on your list.
And put that condition in there, and put the financing condition there if that's something, or an inspection, or a house to sell,
or all three.
And it's low risk real estate, which is for and we're getting back to the end users trading real estate back and forth. Would you say that the investors had a mass exodus to our market?
Yeah, because when the interest rates were 1.5%, any property you bought in Windsor was cash flow positive. It was making money at the end of the month, at the end of the year, because rents were so high here. You run your numbers now at 4.5% or 5% interest, and they don't cash flow. You're losing money every month. So, not that investors are completely out of the game. There's still deals out there, but it's just not like everything's a deal.
Right.
So investors would literally buy everything, or compete on everything. Now they're out of competing for everything. They're just being selective.
So we've lost a big chunk of that buyer pool.
Yeah.
I mean, I can confidently say that we lost the GTA buyer here for the most part, or 80-90% of them.
Yeah. And what's the reason for that?
I think there's opportunity in their own market. So I think there's opportunity in either their own market or a market closer to them, where that's grabbed their attention. So we're getting back to the local end users trading real estate back and forth, and that's a really fun market to work in. I mean, March, when I'm listing a property, I'm going to offer dates. Scotty, I literally would get an offer in my inbox. I don't even know who it's from. I'm like, who is this? Who is this? This person never saw the property. It's an agent from GTA just sending me an offer, and I gotta figure out. I know everybody wants to boo-hoo, poor realtor, right? But it was absolutely insane. 100 showings on properties. Again, I do miss that time a little bit, but this market's a fun one to work in for sure.
More balanced and more fair, especially for the local end user. So the Toronto buyer, a lot of them are out of the market, but a lot of Toronto people are still moving here, in my experience, just not, so many of them.
Yeah, for sure.
And we also do have a lot of those catalysts still that people have seemed to have forgotten about, like the battery plant, Amazon, Rocket Mortgages rebranding here, Edison Financial.
And that's a great point. I mean, those were huge news stories, and I feel like we need these interest rates to just land where they're going to land, get a new news cycle in, and it's unbelievable how much the media influences people's decision-making process, right?
Yeah.
It's
Fear is very powerful. I would say the fear is overpowering right now.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot to be not necessarily afraid about, but there's a lot to be concerned with, right? We don't know. It's the uncertainty the most, I would say.
Yeah.
Like you said, we need to settle somewhere. And the
100%.
problem is that the more recent news is we're going to keep raising rates until inflation comes down, and we don't know when that's going to be. So when there's uncertainty, people don't make decisions. They just sit on their hands and feet. Once we have certainty and clarity, then we come back to probably your typical 3 to 5% appreciation per year would be
Yeah.
my best guess. Just don't know when that's going to be.
Well, Scotty, hit him with real quick, and then this will be our last points here. Then we'll bring Christian on to talk about the lawyer process in a real estate transaction. But let's hit the people with what is inflation, and why does rising interest rates deflate inflation?
So inflation has 2 points to it. Number one, it's the rising cost of goods and services over time. It's kind of natural given our monetary system, right? They're always printing more money. They're always deflating the currency. So things typically rise at 2 to 3% per year, depending on what basket of goods you're looking at. Another part to inflation is just what I said, the devaluation of your currency, right? When they print more money, the value of your dollar goes down. That means it takes more dollars to buy the same goods and services because they're just not worth as much. So typically we target a 2% inflation rate, but with the government locking down society and we produce less goods and services, but you also printed trillions of dollars and flooded the system with money. Now you have all this money chasing less goods and services, and you had low interest rates and basically free money to put to work. It just created the perfect storm. But what's interesting is it took so long to really, right? You saw shades of it too. All of a sudden inflation was 3% and 4%. And they were saying, well, it's transitory. It'll come back down. But a lot of people on the other side were saying, no, it's not transitory. Like you can't do what you're doing without massive consequences. And now, 12 to 18 months later, here we are with just out of control inflation. They don't have any other tools in their box other than rising rates to basically they have to hammer demand. And they have to hit people's wealth because a lot of people made a lot of money in this big run. A lot of people have a ton of equity in their home. And when people feel rich and their stock portfolio is up and they have $500,000 of equity in their house that just in 2 years you found $500,000, they're going to spend money.
Yeah.
And they're going to be chasing a limited supply of goods and services. China's on lockdown. They're not, it's hard to ship stuff here, so we don't have as many goods. Lumber was out of control, so you can't build houses as quickly. So it was kind of the perfect storm. So all they can do is they want to make people feel poor and they want to hit their wealth. And that's also why we have this massive negative news cycle. It's intentional in my opinion. You want fear in the market. It's the only way to slow what's happening because if people continue to feel wealthy, they're going to keep spending money and inflation is going to get out of control. We also have elections coming up in the US and you don't want 10% inflation coming into elections. So there's a lot of things. Basically that's their only tool. It's going to take a while to filter through, right?
Yeah.
Like they're raising rates now, but we're still seeing 8% inflation.
Sprinkle in a little bit of war on that, and here we are. Just a little touch, right?
Just a touch of war. The war doesn't help.
It's a great breakdown. So how does raising interest rates just decreases everybody's
it
buying
decreases
power
asset prices. So my stock portfolio is down 40%. The value of my home just dropped 20%. I don't feel as wealthy. Negative news every time I open Facebook or Instagram or the newspaper. I'm not going to go buy that pool. I'm not going to build that new house. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative now. People start spending less. Inflation comes down. They look like heroes.
It's working.
Yeah.
So
we're not seeing it in the numbers yet.
Yeah.
It's going to take, like I said, in my opinion, 12 to 18 months to filter through. And then they're going to say, look, we fixed the problem that we created. And they're going to act like heroes. But
from a real estate perspective, I can definitely say I've been through a few cycles here. And it's cyclical. Like we knew a real estate cycle was coming. That was an extremely long run. That was when COVID started, I was like, that was a great run. Back to basics we go. Okay, like let's it's time to hammer out the basics like we know how to, and that's it. And then it just got busier, which absolutely blew my. If a pandemic didn't cool the market down, then obviously this is what it takes to cool the market down because it has absolutely
big time
cooled it down. I think our industry needed it though. I mean, I'd rather the prices come down this way than keep going that way so aggressive. And to be honest, I think the real estate industry needed it as well. I mean, it felt cheap out there for a while, and the pros are going to be the pros now. And again, it's definitely time to get to work.
Very good point. There's not much skill in the previous market on the sell side. Not that there's no skill, it's just you can get away with a lot more. But now we're seeing properties sit. We're seeing agents that don't know how to market properly. They don't know how to negotiate because they were brought up in this market that was unnatural. So now the skill and experience comes into play a lot more. So that's a great point as well.
Yep. All right. Well, if you do have some money left over, and you, or if you're trading real estate in this new market, it obviously it's a complicated process, but no more complicated than when you get to the lawyer's office. I mean, I've signed paperwork on our offers with hundreds of buyers and sellers, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is so much signatures." I said, "This is nothing. Wait till you get to the lawyer's office."
True, yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to bring in Christian Janisse from Simply Close. And he's going to break down that process for us, which I think is going to be pretty valuable content here.
Awesome.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. We're back, and we are here with Christian Janisse from Simply Close, an absolute electric lawyer who's just dialing in the process and really building it around the buyer or seller experience. Would you say that's kind of the method here?
Yeah, the big focus for our firm is on the customer experience, just making sure that everybody's being spoken with throughout the process. A lot of communication, using technology to make the process easier for everyone. I know the legal process is very complicated.
Sure.
And there's a lot involved, and we try to break it down step by step for every client we have.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I've had some buyers and sellers where they signed some paperwork with the lawyer at the end, but in between when they got the deal done in the end, they hadn't communicated with the lawyer really at all. So there's a huge gap there, and I think your kind of main focus is on communicating throughout the whole process.
Yeah, actually, when I first started, I spoke to a lot of agents, and they said, "We don't know what happens when the deal goes to the lawyer's office." And it was actually something I wasn't aware of. So now we reach out to people right away and just get them roped in so that they feel like they're going through a journey throughout the entire process. We call it the customer journey.
Yeah, and I don't think I understood what until I started buying real estate. You don't really understand what the whole lawyer process entails. So why don't you break it down for us? So you get a transaction from a realtor or the realtor's office. What's that process look like from that day to close and then after?
So as soon as we get a deal it could be from a realtor's office, somebody could reach out to us. As soon as we have a copy of the agreement of purchase and sale, we open up a file on our end, and we immediately send out a client introduction email. It has a link to a form for everyone to fill out every single thing that we need. So we explain to them that if you fill out this form correctly, we will not need to bug you. This is every piece of information that we need, and it's broken down as to why we need it. And it'll say spousal status doesn't include common law, so that there's no confusion throughout the entire process.
And this is all done. These people are doing this from their home. That you're not bringing them into the office, scanning IDs, all that stuff, or is this all done digital from the comfort of their home? Yeah.
Yeah, it's all done from the comfort of their own home. They can do it whenever they want, so they don't necessarily have to do it on our timeline. We send it, and they can, if you work afternoons, you want to fill it out at 2 a.m, feel free. We get it in our inbox, and you get a notice that we've received it. Once we have that information from the client, depending on if it's a purchase or a sale, if it's a purchase, we also need the mortgage instructions, but in the background, we do our due diligence. So we start to search the title. We have all the information now from the client, so we can process the documents a lot faster. But once we have the mortgage information, plus the client information, plus the agreement of purchase and sale, we prepare all of the paperwork.
Let's touch on searching title here because you could say that to somebody, then we search title, and they're like, oh, cool, search title. What is searching title, and what happens when title's not clean?
So it's a broad term because there's a lot of things involved. You could have a building permit, so we search for any open building permits to make sure that there's nothing outstanding. If there is something outstanding, it can get a little dicey. It depends on whether it goes to the root of the title. So is it going to affect the individual's use of the home? For a permit, that would usually be, you need to get that fixed. If you're a buyer and there's an outstanding permit, you can agree to assume it if you want. But there's other things like easements that you might see on title. So for example, if you have a hydro or a utility line running through your property, there will be a quote unquote defect because you won't be able to use the property as you might have wanted to when you originally bought it.
Right.
So at
Right.
that point, you need to consider whether it's going to affect your use or not. For
Gotcha.
easements, generally, those don't go to the root of title because they're normal.
So somebody couldn't back out of a deal because you found an easement that they didn't know about
Yeah,
in general?
generally you can't back out because the standard language in the agreement of purchase and sale has automatic exceptions, and easements are generally one of them. It
I see,
depends
I
on
see.
the type of easement. For example, there's a lot of solar panel leases. There's a lot of like Reliance.
So does that roof become an easement?
What they'll do is they'll register the lease on the property, and then you either have to buy it out or assume the agreement. But if you say, hey, I never wanted to assume that agreement, at that point you could possibly back out because it wasn't what you originally bargained for.
Yeah, if we're getting to solar panels and that's not coming up until a closing table, I think that's on the realtors right there. We've dealt with a lot of solar panels, and you gotta have a plan for those from the get go and make sure everybody knows what's going on there. That's probably a whole episode in its own.
But there's other things like there's construction liens. Sometimes like you wouldn't necessarily know if there's a construction lien until afterwards. Sometimes there's other issues like super old mortgages that just didn't get discharged because it went from a paper-based system to an electronic-based system. You don't run into those issues anymore, but if you have a seller that's owned a property for 40 years, sometimes the title can have quite a few issues, but most of which can get resolved before closing.
I'm shocked how easy it is to put a lien on someone else's property. I've had a few transactions where individuals actually said, "No, I have an agreement of purchase and sale on this property. I'm putting a lien on the property." Right. So in rare cases, I mean it's rare, but it happens out there.
Oh, and the hot water tank companies, they're not liens, they're notice of security interest, but they put those on the property all the time, and it causes all kinds of problems. Because you, as the seller, you either have to pay it off, or as the buyer, it's now going to cost you extra money because you're going to assume the hot water tank, and now you have to pay extra to get that notice of security interest basically lowered behind the mortgage company that you're going to get.
So we've got the process up to the transactions there. You send them a form and they upload all their documents, whatever they need, all the questionnaire. That's filled out successfully. We're closing in 30 days. What happens from that moment for the next 30 days?
So once we do the title search and we have all the documentation, we prepare the legal paperwork. And like you said in the last segment, there's a lot of paperwork, particularly for buyers. Once that's ready, we send out an email and it has a link to our calendar, and clients can just pick a time to sign. We do the signings online. If somebody does need to sign in person, we will accommodate them. But
Sorry, now when you say online, is this via FaceTime or Zoom, or do you have to witness each other, or is it?
it's the exact same experience as being in person. You actually have to physically sign every single time. It's not like DocuSign where you just get a package of all these papers that you don't know. It's basically Zoom and DocuSign combined into one.
It is on video though.
It's on
Gotcha.
video. Has to be on video because that's how we verified their ID. And then it has to be a handwritten signature. So we have a program that we use that actually allows us to prevent you from using one of those pre-populated signatures, so that because some of the banks are picky, and you actually can't sign unless the lawyer in the meeting clicks and tells you, okay, now you can sign, so that we know that we've explained it to you and that you've told us that you understood.
Talk about expediting the process. Hey, well, like that is, and again, it's at people's. Their most precious commodity is their time, right? So to be able to dial this process in where they can do it on their time, kids, work, this, that, the other.
I've had kids in meetings. I've had people join during their lunch, during their lunch hour. It makes it a lot simpler, and it's also simpler for us. We don't have to scan any documents. Both parties get emailed copies of everything that they signed, and then we can just use that right away. We don't have to worry about, did we lose any paper? Everything that you signed is right there, and it's sent to you by email.
So we've signed. Now, this is probably a day. You'd say probably these signatures would hit maybe a day or two before closing, or the week of closing?
Yeah, generally we try to sign like anywhere from 3 to 5 business days before closing. Depends on whether it's a purchase or a sale. For a sale, it depends on the client. There's a lot more flexibility with a sale because there's a lot less involved from the seller's point of view. for a purchase, for example, you have to get your mortgage. You have to get your mortgage. You have to get the down payment. So we try to do those a little bit earlier, just so that we're not sending people emails the day before closing. Hey, drop $200,000 into our trust account,
Right.
just so that they can plan. I know some people have to like shift their investments, and we do break it down for them. We have a video in all of our emails that breaks down like, okay, you've done this step. This is the next step,
nice.
and this is how you do it.
Now I'm at day of closing and I'm a seller. What does that day look like for me?
So the keys are a little bit of an issue now post COVID.
Yeah,
It used to be
I know.
used to be very simple. You would just, the keys would always go to the seller's lawyer's office, and the seller's lawyer would transfer them to the buyer's
I don't
lawyer.
mind. You know what? Honestly, like personally, and Scott, let me know how you feel about this. I don't mind going to get the keys and organizing it for the buyers or so. I don't mind it. You know,
We don't mind it either.
I really don't. I mean, I don't mind if that becomes part of the process. It allows us to have that moment with them too on that big day for them. So I mean, I really don't mind sending someone else to get the keys, right?
We don't mind it either. What we hate is when nobody tells us. So sometimes when
Right.
you have a buyer and the other lawyer will tell you, oh, we don't know, we'll get back to you on the keys. Then it's the day of and they say, oh, the realtors are going to deal with it. But we have a system internally so that we make sure that we follow up with it so that we know exactly where the keys are the day of.
So that'd be that side as the buyer, because the seller's got to get the keys to a lawyer's office, or a lot of times doing it between realtors. Now I'm a seller, I'm closing. Where's my check? How am I picking this up?
So as soon as the deal's closed, like money's exchanged between the lawyers, documents are exchanged, we change the ownership online. From the seller's perspective, we do all of our banking electronically, so we pay you the same day.
EFT or
EFT.
Oh, nice.
So there's no charges to you. It just takes like 12 to 24 hours to come in.
Yeah.
From a buyer's perspective, as soon as the deal's closed, we send you an email. It's a closing confirmation. It just welcomes you to your new home, and then it has a blurb as to where the keys are. So if it's with the realtors, if it's at a lockbox. For some sellers, we actually have our own lockboxes as well, so we'll leave that at the property, or we use a third-party delivery service to, like we've delivered keys to people's work before.
Yeah.
Because it's no difference to us whether we say, hey, can you pick up the keys at the other lawyer's office and drop it off at our office, or can you pick it up at that lawyer's office and drop it off to the client directly?
And I think it's all about just taking that any stressful moments away from a buyer or seller. I think that's why we love what we do, and I have no problem doing that stuff. Honestly, I don't.
And we try to keep the realtor involved in the
Yeah.
process as well. We notify them afterwards so that they can also reach out to their clients and let them know, hey, we know that your deal was either delayed, or we know that your deal was closed. Congratulations. That way everybody feels like they're heavily involved in the process
like
and knows
that.
what's going on.
Different than most experiences from most some other lawyers that I've dealt with personally, where just I'm not communicated with, don't know if the property closed or not.
Yeah.
So that communication is huge. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now
Yeah.
you're representing the seller. Now it's not all roses on this one. You got a buyer on the other side that says, and so in this changing market, are we having any buyers backing out of deals right now? I mean, we've all heard it out there. I personally have not, or I don't think anybody in this office has either had a buyer that has opted to back out of a deal. Not that that's an option, but are we hearing those stories out there, and what happens?
It's happening. I think it's like you said about the news cycle. It is happening, certainly more often than it did before, but it's not every single deal. Like we might get 1 in 30 deals, 1 in 40 deals where somebody
Right.
completely backs out. What you're seeing more often is a renegotiation of the closing date, renegotiation of like, okay, I'll give you $1,500 to extend this for 30 days so that the buyer can rearrange their finances. And that has to do with the interest rates. Because the interest rates are rising, what a house would have appraised for has, maybe gone down, and they didn't qualify for what they thought they were going to get
Right.
originally. And that's where it comes. It's a huge benefit to have a good team around you, good team of realtors, good mortgage broker, good mortgage specialist, and then a good lawyer.
Now, what happens when a buyer decides, or what are a seller's options when a buyer decides that they simply don't want to close or can't close? What are the ramifications or the legal action that takes place on that?
So from the seller's perspective, you have you can either negotiate. You got to kind of feel it out to see like what is the reason for the delay, or why are they not able to close? Is it because of financing? And from the lawyer's perspective, I've dealt with banks. I know that some of the B-tier lenders can be a little bit more difficult to deal with. So by having that experience, as a lawyer, we can see, okay, this is going to close. It's probably going to be a day or two. So we can tell the seller, hey, like, I think that you should, maybe negotiate with them and let this go. There's other times where you can just totally tell that the buyer was in over their head. They had no clue what they were doing. They accidentally bought something that they couldn't afford, and they're just taking you for a ride. So depending on the circumstances, you can either renegotiate, or if it gets to the worst case where they back out entirely, you need to list the property immediately.
Right.
And then there is a mutual release. So you can get the deposit, but you have to be very careful with just grabbing that deposit, particularly right now with the prices going down. If the deposit's $10,000 and your house goes down by $40,000, by signing that mutual release, you're going to forfeit $30,000 worth of value.
Right.
If the prices are, previously I would have said you're more likely to want to take that deposit because the price may have stayed the same or gone up, in which case taking the $10,000 is a low risk. You get it right away. So it just depends on the circumstances, but you can sue them for the difference.
Right. Too many people do that? I mean,
a lot of talk about it, but no, not often.
Yeah,
what happens is a lot of people will say, oh, I'm going to sue. It's a very stressful process. You don't want to do that. Preferably, you want to negotiate and try and work something out with the buyer. As frustrating as it is, you do want to try and negotiate with them to relist the property and have people go through, and they're aware that it's being relisted, so they're going to try and take advantage of that. It's always better to try and negotiate, but there are times where people just can't do it.
Yeah.
It had to happen 2 weeks ago. The seller was actually going to give a mortgage to the buyer as a vendor take-back mortgage, where they sell the house and don't get all the cash up front, and whatever the difference is, they were going to put it as a mortgage. But the buyer actually already had 2 other mortgages, so this would have been a third, and it was just very clear that it wasn't going to work.
Right, right. And then now, if a seller wants to not close, which is probably pretty rare, is that the same circumstances, or?
It is pretty rare. For a buyer, it's a lot more difficult to sue because you have to quantify your damages. And what that means is that you have to show the harm that was caused by the seller's action. And that becomes a lot more difficult when you're buying property. Because for a seller, it's super easy. You listed the property, you sold it for $500,000. They didn't buy it. You relisted it, you sold it for $450,000. That was the next highest offer. Your damages are automatically at least $50,000. For a buyer, if you buy another house, it's hard to quantify, well, that house had a pool, that one didn't. That house had 3 bedrooms, this one had 4. Like, you might not be able to get the exact same house, so it becomes a lot more difficult.
Right.
But you can sue them as well for the difference in, the interest rates have gone up. It's just a lot more difficult to, because, for example, if the interest rates have gone up, were you going to get a variable rate mortgage? They would have gone up anyways. So how do you quantify that?
Right. I'm sure you see a lot of interesting situations cross your plate. Is there something you see time and time again? Any tips and tricks out there in these offers where you see some people making the same mistakes time and time again? Or
well, you actually touched on it in the previous segment. Conditions are back, which I think is probably the biggest thing that people overlook when they're signing an agreement. They don't put any conditions, and I know with the way the market was, it was so hot that it wasn't even feasible to use conditions, which was scary for us, because a seller should feel confident if a buyer puts a financing condition in there. That's proof that they're taking it seriously. When you have people buying houses completely unconditional, sight unseen, it's crazy. So I think the biggest thing is to have like an experienced realtor heavily involved with the lawyer so that they put conditions that matter to them. If it's financing, if it's an inspection. A lot of times you see people sign these agreements and then they want to inspect it after, only to find out that they can't. They've already waived it.
Right.
And it doesn't matter. You may have told them, you may not have told them. They're still, they're in that, honeymoon phase where it's like, oh, I'm just excited and there's all these bids and all this pressure, and they overlook it, and then afterwards they're like, oh, now I need to go get a mortgage, and it didn't appraise for as much.
Right.
So I think it's actually great to have conditions. Selling your house as well. I've seen a lot of people. We just extended a deal yesterday because it was conditional on a sale. They didn't get the price they wanted, so we've extended it for 30 days. So at least that protects them from having to.
My
complete the
favorite.
purchase.
It takes the guesswork out of it. To have a house to sell condition is, it's as a realtor, it's my favorite process to go through. I find a house, I write an offer on it, I make a condition on my house to sell. I prep my house for a couple of days, whatever, get it up on market. I sell that, I remove there. And again, you can have a home inspection and inspect the home before you remove your house to sell condition. I'll typically strengthen my offer by saying, yes, the house to sell condition is for 30 days, but there's going to be an escape clause in there, of course. You can still accept another offer if you wish. But my inspection condition, that's only going to be 5 days. So I want to show you that I'm serious and I'm going to inspect the property. I'm going to invest into the deal. And that way I need to know if I'm buying it too, right? Because I'm confident that my own house would sell. So at a negotiation table, it's that experience that comes in, how to structure these conditions and how to use conditions actually to your advantage and tell the story of the offer as opposed to just throwing a bunch of conditions in there and hoping they get removed.
Yeah, and that's where having an experienced realtor really matters, because you're familiar with the conditions. You're going to come across them through all of the houses that you've dealt with. And what I find, there are ways to use the conditions creatively. Like, for example, I had a client that bought a property out of town, and they had a financing condition, and they didn't want to drive out of town to go view the property because it was very far. But with the financing condition, they could actually use that as a way to view the property, as opposed to like just saying, well, I don't want to, like, I don't know, because the financing condition, they can now back out and say, well, I went and saw the property, I don't want to do it, but I'm only going to blame it on the financing condition.
1 ounce is good as 100 ounces. All you need is one, right? So, but you got to do your due diligence and buy yourself some time in some transactions too.
And the big thing is, I think that people need to view the property. When they're going to see it, they should check it again before the closing date. Sometimes they'll check it and then they won't really check everything. Like when I do the signing meeting, I tell all the clients to check everything, like turn on all the faucets, turn the furnace on, turn the AC on, because once the deal's closed, it's very hard to recover that. And I get a lot of calls afterwards. Faucet doesn't work.
AC.
Everything. Dryer, washer.
Pools are absolute nightmares, right? Especially if you're buying real estate that has a pool in the winter and then you go and open it up. That's almost impossible to protect yourself against those.
Yeah. There are some things that you just can't get around. But I do try to tell everybody to like take it seriously. It's crazy how many people buy these houses for so much money and then only come to us afterwards and say, the dryer doesn't work. And I'm like, well, why would you not turn that on? Right. And then they're like, well, do you think that I can get the $300 back? And I'm like, it's going to take you forever. Like, you're going to make $300 faster than we can get it back. And it's a sad thing to tell people. I don't want to tell people that. So that's why I tell them, as soon as we do the signing meeting, test everything.
Right.
Everything. Check it. Make sure that all the light switches work. Like, little things.
So what's great advice? I mean, I think we could have you on here for 2 hours if we want. We'll bring you back on again for sure if we need any advice or anything like that. But what's next for Simply Close? What's next for you guys?
So for us, we're trying to build like one of a kind experience for real estate law to make it super simple for everyday person that's buying a house. They know exactly what's involved. We take them through a step-by-step journey. We do everything online, and that's what we're trying to do, is create that internal efficiency so that we have a team of closing specialists that's dedicated to you, so that you can reach out at any time. You will get an answer very quickly. Nice. We don't wait weeks to respond. We don't wait days to respond. We respond the same day. Well,
I think you guys are doing a great job, and I think you're only going to get busier from here. The word on the street's very positive on your end, and congratulations on all your success. Yeah, Scott, you still here?
Yeah, I think so. Fell asleep there.